Greetings, I'm Doc V, and we have just recently celebrated Juneteenth. Juneteenth celebrates when 250,000 slaves were freed in Texas 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed by President Lincoln in 1863. But Texas was not notified that the slaves were freed. So slavery continued in the state of Texas for 2 years until 1865. So the black man's mountain is nothing new. In 1936, a young man, 22-year-old Jesse Owens, qualified for the Olympic Games and was shipped over to Nazi Germany, where he competed against athletes, where the leader and dictator at that time was Adolf Hitler, and Hitler was destroying any other races outside of what he called or deemed the class race or the superior race of Germans. So he had the Jews killed, and anyone that did not represent the ultimate physicality of his particular race, they were eliminated. So anyway, Jesse Owens and his teammate Metcalf came over to Nazi Germany to run in the Olympic Games back in 1936. And Jesse Owens won the gold medal in the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the long jump, and he also participated in the 4x100 meter relay. He earned 4 gold medals, and some say he was the greatest track athlete of all time. Now, of course, his records have been broken. Technology has produced better tracks, better shoes, better equipment, better training. But for what he did back then, basically stood alone in the midst of racism, in the midst of oppression happening over in the United States, where he couldn't get a good job. He was recruited to run at Ohio State University, coming from Alabama. And when he was recruited to Ohio State University, he was still limited to where he could go on the campus. Even in the town of Columbus, Ohio, there were certain restaurants and certain places he could not go because in 1936, blacks were considered second-class citizens. However, he was so fast that let's take him on over to Germany and see how he runs up against the Germans and the Russians and the Italians. Let's see what happens. Jesse Owens smoked him. He did an incredible feat. But when he came back to the United States, the only jobs he could get was maintenance, sweeping out and cleaning at some kind of recreation place. They had him racing horses for entertainment. He still couldn't go in restaurants. He still couldn't go into public places, some public places, because he was black. Even after all he accomplished and how positively he represented the United States. Let's move up to World War II in Nazi Germany. Many of you have heard of the 761st Tank Battalion, which was the U.S. forces against Germany. We were at war. We were in World War II. The 761 Tank Battalion consisted of 6 white officers, 30 black officers, and 676 enlisted black men who were to go into Germany and fight on the front lines. They were not expected to succeed. Some say that this was a plan to wipe out blacks that were multiplying and populating over in the United States, and this is a good way to wipe them out. The jury is still out on that. They put these men on the front lines and sit them on the grounds and in troops and tanks and by air, sea, and land over to Nazi Germany to fight. Again, they were expected to fail, but they did not fail. They liberated 30 towns on their crusade into Germany. And they did an incredible feat. They accomplished an incredible feat. Yet when they came back to the United States, many of them died. Some of them came back crippled. Some of them came back whole in one piece, thinking, I fought in our world war and we won that war and I represent the United States. Now when I come back to the United States, I'm going to be treated with respect. But that didn't happen. When Jesse Owens came back from the 1936 Olympics, tried to get in line at the restaurant, they said, all negotiations need to go to the back and come in at the back and get your hamburger at the back and wait. Excuse me, I almost had a slip there. After the remaining fighters and war veterans of the 761st Tank Battalion came back to the United States, they had the same treatment. Boy, what you doing over here? Get in the back of the line. What you doing in this neighborhood? You better get your butt out of here or something might happen to you. Discrimination, the Black Mountain, opportunities for African Americans that were freed from slavery. The battle was still on. The journey had not yet been completed. We've come a long way, but we still have a ways to go. I can remember when I was newly married and I found this townhouse apartment, this rental situation. And I met the landlord and said, I got the down payment deposit for you, and we can pay you, at that time it was about $750 a month for a two-bedroom, two-bathroom townhouse. This was way back. I was probably early 30s, late 20s. I got married. It was probably my early 30s. Anyway, I was paying, working, cutting the yard, cutting the lawn, fixing things up. My wife at that time, she was happy, felt secure, and I was paying on time, got the mortgage paid, paying the utilities, taking care of everything. And then all of a sudden, one day, I saw this note on the door, and I looked at it, and it said, you are being evicted from the premises. Conduct yourself accordingly. Sheriff's office at that particular township at that time. I'm like, what is this? What is this? I got on the phone, tried to call the landlord, tried to call him. I said, I need you to get over here. I need to talk to you. What's going on? Finally, the landlord showed up. Young white man. And I said, I got an eviction notice on the door. What's going on? I've been paying you on time every month, $750 a month. I've been paying you for 6 months, going on 6 months. Have you just been taking the money and just paying your bills and not paying the mortgage? And I had him cornered. And at least he had the decency. He nodded his head, bowed his head down. He looked up at me and he said, yeah. He said, I'm sorry. That's what I did. I took your payment and I took care of my bills, handled my situation, and let the place go foreclosed. And I said, you got me sitting here with a wife and working and trying to make it, and you did that to me. He turned around and he walked off. I didn't have time to hire an attorney. I didn't have time to hire a lawyer. If he was in that much of dire straits, then he wasn't going to be able to cough up the money and correct that situation. So I had to move out. I had to take my money, get my things, put it in storage, lay low with some friends, try to find another place. It was a terrible situation. Was I discriminated against? I mean, this could have happened to whatever race you were, whatever socioeconomic level you were at, this could have happened. But this affected my physiological and safety needs at the base of the mountain. Terrible time, terrible situation. Racism has changed and has evolved until where now it's institutionalized. When did the institutionalization of racism begin? I'm not really sure. I just know that after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, more blacks were killed during that time than all the times during slavery. Why? Because they were no longer property. When you were a slave, you were property. And you don't mess with someone's property because they're making money from me. But once that slave was freed, he became competition. He became a threat. And that's when lynching, Jim Crow laws came into effect. And blacks were not only trying to feed their families and have safety and physiological needs met, but they were trying to stay alive. Let's go back to the 1936 Olympics with Jesse Owens. Many people miss this, but track athletes or people that have participated in the sport of track and field, if I make this note to you, if you haven't already observed it, go check the videos, Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf. They ran the 100 meters. Now, track athletes know that you have to run the preliminaries before you get to the final 8 sprinters in the final heat. 3 athletes from all countries come in, and the Olympic trials are going to be starting in the United States coming up this Friday, which is tomorrow. I don't know how many countries, but you have to qualify. You have to have a certain qualifying time. So let's say there's 50 athletes that want to run the 100 meters. They have them spaced and seated based on their preliminary time. And they run them, and then the top 3 in each heat of 8 go to the next race. The first race is the preliminaries. The second race is the semifinals. And then the third race is the final. If you don't get the top 3, you're cut, you're cut, you're cut, you're cut. And then that final race is the fastest 8 people in the world. Now, what people don't realize is your time in the preliminaries gets you a center lane because it's easier when they come in at an angle, they come in like an arrow crossing the finish line. So they put the fastest preliminary athletes in the center and then the slowest ones on the outside lanes. Well, Jesse Owens blew him away in the preliminaries. Metcalf blew him away in the preliminaries. Jesse Owens and Metcalf blew him away in the semifinals. And when they got to the final heat, they should have been right next to each other in the center. But if you check the videos, go to YouTube, check out Jesse Owens' 1936 Olympics. They had Jesse all the way in lane 1, and they had Metcalf all the way in lane 8. And they had the Russians and the Germans and everybody else in the center. Institutionalized racism. They didn't want the blacks to win that in front of Hitler, in front of Germany. He didn't want that to happen, so he figured, let's just put them on the outside lane, and then they'll just mess with their mind, and, that'll get rid of it. Well, what happened? When the gun went off, pow! Jesse Owens took off in lane 1, Metcalf took off in lane 8, and they came across the line, gold and silver, first and second, while the Russians and the Germans in the middle struggling, fighting for 3rd, 4th place, and what happened? Was this done on purpose? I believe it was. I believe it was. Have I read any documentation on that? No. Has anyone else brought that up? Not to my knowledge. Racism exists. There are some jobs African Americans need not apply. There are some states or some counties in some states that we don't need to try to live in those areas. There was an instance, I can't remember what state it was, but it was one of the states way out west. It wasn't California. It wasn't Utah. It was one of the states, I cannot remember if it was North Dakota or South Dakota or Montana, I'm not sure. But back in the 1940 something, they just decided, we don't want any blacks living here. You got to move out. They gave the men 2 years to get packed up, get out of here. And they gave the women 3 years to move out and get out. And at that point, they were institutionalizing laws and rules that stated, you cannot own property, you can't come in this town to work, we don't want you here, get out. Some of that is not covered. Many of these instances are not covered in the history books. I believe that to evoke change in society, and particularly in America, is to mandate that in order to graduate from high school or in order to graduate from college, that you must take a Black history studies class. Well, we got history. We talk about slavery and history. It's just part of all history, part of general history. No, it is not. What really happened on those slave ships, what really happened on those slave plantations, what really happened behind closed doors that causes blacks being 13% of the population, yet 40 and 50% of the incarcerated, of those that are in prison. History doesn't talk about that. History doesn't talk about some of the states out west. They have discrimination where, okay, one particular state, I'm not going to name it because I don't want any problems. I'm going to name this state. Look it up. United States is 13% black. Phoenix, Arizona, 5% black. Yet, their jails, that they're incarcerated, are approximately over 50% African Americans locked up. But in that state, they only have 5% of the population is black. It might be even more skewed than that. So what am I saying? I'm saying the battle goes on. The fight goes on. It troubles me that the African Americans or blacks that have made it, we've got some sports stars, some sports heroes in basketball, sports heroes in football, sports heroes in soccer, sports heroes in boxing. We've got some entertainers, singers, artists, business owners that are multi-millionaires, more money than you can spend. And I wish that we could come together and create opportunities for those young black men and women who did not have the opportunity or did not have the basic support to lift them up out of their situations. I wish we could come together and do this. Now, let me say that there have been instances in this country and in our history where we did come together and we did pool our monies together and we did create a community. It happened out in Oklahoma, Wall Street, 1921. It happened up in New York City. It's happened down in Florida. There have been 5, 6 instances where blacks bought land and built up houses and land and businesses, and they were thriving. But what happened? The wider society, W-I-D-E-R, came in and chopped it down and burned it down and destroyed it because for some reason they felt threatened. The rising up of the black population for some reason is threatening to the wider population. What is the answer? We got to stay together. We got to keep fighting. Things are better, but it's not over with yet. I try to do my part. I try to talk to our young people and encourage them and let them know that whatever you can conceive, you can achieve if you believe. That you have to trust in God, never give up, and fight through it. And believe that God sees all and that there's going to be a final solution and a final judgment over all this. Believe it and walk in it. Love each other, support each other. Don't hate, but participate. I'm Doc V, and I'll see you next time.